My name is Amanda Parker. I'm 25 now, married to Mark, my rock through everything, and mom to Lily, our 4-year-old daughter with a laugh that melts even the coldest of my memories. But back when I was 18, I stood on the edge of what should have been a new chapter, only to watch it collapse before I could even turn the page. Graduation day. I can still feel the weight of the polyester gown, the sharp corners of the cap pressing into my scalp, the nervous hope bubbling in my chest. I remember clutching my diploma like it was a key to a better life, because for years, that's what my dad had told me it would be. Amanda, he used to say, you're going to college, no matter what. That's why I set up that fund. You deserve it. But my dad wasn't there to see me cross the stage. He'd passed away the summer before, just a few weeks after my last day of high school. Cancer. Fast and cruel. His death left a gaping hole in our lives, and a power vacuum Sandra was all too happy to fill. Sandra. My stepmother. Always perfectly dressed, always polite, but never really warm. She had this smile that never quite reached her eyes. I remember that smile vividly because she wore it as she pulled me aside after the ceremony, just outside the gymnasium where families were snapping pictures and tossing graduation caps in the air. Amanda, she said, as if she were about to tell me I'd dropped my wallet or forgotten my corsage. I need you to know that the college fund your dad left behind, it won't be yours after all. I blinked at her, unsure I'd heard her right. My heart skipped and then started pounding. What do you mean? She just shrugged, like we were discussing the weather. Ian and I talked about it. And we both think it would be better if the money went towards something more practical. Ian. My half-brother. Her golden child. 2 years older than me and already spoiled beyond belief. He got a car when he turned 16. I got a job. And now, apparently, he was getting my future too. Ian has a plan, she continued. He wants to invest it. Start a business. Something stable. And Amanda, you've always been more of a dreamer. College might not be the best fit for you. The way she said it, like she was doing me a favor, sparing me from failure, I wanted to scream. My father had told me, himself, about that fund. It was in a separate account, something he started when I was barely old enough to spell university. That money was for me, I said, my voice cracking. Dad wanted me to go to college. And then, right on cue, Ian strolled over. He must have been eavesdropping because he didn't even ask what we were talking about. Amanda, calm down, he said, casually flipping his sunglasses onto his head like he was in a movie. I'll make good use of it. I'm planning to invest it in something that'll help all of us. Dad would have wanted us to be smart. I stared at him. You can't just take what's mine. That's stealing. Sandra flinched, not at the accusation, but at the volume of my voice. She looked around nervously, eyes scanning the crowd. Lower your voice, Amanda, she hissed. This is family business. You're being dramatic. Dramatic. It's a word that gets thrown at women who refuse to be quietly robbed. I walked away before I said something I couldn't take back. My legs felt like lead as I made my way to the car. I don't even remember the drive home. That night, I sat in my room, still in my gown, staring at the ceiling and wondering how a day that was supposed to be about possibility had turned into a funeral for my future. The next morning, I tried one more time. Maybe she'd had a change of heart. Maybe she'd realize how wrong it was. I found her in the kitchen, casually sipping her coffee like nothing had happened. Amanda, she said, with a sigh, you're an adult now. It's time to grow up and figure things out for yourself. That money is being used for the family. Which includes Ian. When I told Mark, my boyfriend back then, he was livid. They can't do that, he said. That was your dad's wish. That money was meant for you. But the fund was in Sandra's name. Legally, there wasn't much I could do. And without my dad, I didn't have a single adult in my corner. So I did the only thing I could. I swallowed it. I nodded. I let it go. Or at least, I pretended to. Deep down, I promised myself I'd make it on my own. No handouts. No shortcuts. I'd show them all that I didn't need their money or their approval. And that someday, they'd regret underestimating me. After that day, my life split in two, the one they thought I was living, and the one I actually was. To them, I was the girl who gave up on college, the one who chose a simpler path. Sandra made sure everyone believed that narrative. It was easier for her that way. Easier to pretend Ian had done something noble instead of what he really did, take what wasn't his. But behind the scenes, I worked like my life depended on it. Because in a way, it did. I enrolled at a local community college. It wasn't what I'd dreamed of, but it was a start. I worked at a diner during the day and took classes in the evenings. I cleaned houses on weekends. I skipped birthdays, missed parties, and said no to anything that cost more than a cup of black coffee. Meanwhile, Ian's business was unraveling. He rented office space, bought fancy equipment, posted cryptic motivational quotes online, and had nothing to show for it. But Sandra sang his praises anyway. He's so ambitious, she'd gush. You could learn a thing or two from your brother. Sometimes I'd hear them talking about me when they thought I wasn't around. She always had her head in the clouds, Sandra said once. I'm glad we made the right decision with the fund. She would have wasted it. I would have screamed if I let myself feel the full weight of that betrayal. But I couldn't afford to. I had work to do. Mark was the only person who saw how hard I was grinding. He'd bring me late-night burgers when I had papers to write. He'd drive me to work when I couldn't afford gas. He'd hold me when I cried over spilled coffee and missed deadlines and the sheer exhaustion of carrying everything alone. By the time I finally transferred to a state university, I was running on fumes. But I did it. I applied for scholarships. I took out loans. I never asked them for a dime. I didn't even tell them when I got accepted. I didn't want them to have a single piece of my joy. Mark proposed during finals week, right in the middle of my apartment kitchen, with a ring he bought secondhand. I said yes with flour on my hands and a textbook open on the table. When Sandra found out, her voice dripped with condescension. Are you sure you're ready for marriage, Amanda? It's a big responsibility. And you're still trying to figure out your life. Ian chimed in, of course. Maybe you should focus on your career, if you can even call it that. I smiled politely and said, don't worry about me. I'm doing just fine. Because I was. I had something they'd never understand, resilience. University was brutal. I worked nights, attended classes during the day, and barely slept. There were times I thought I wouldn't make it. I remember studying in the break room at my waitressing job, reading psychology notes while microwaving dollar store soup. I lived off caffeine, adrenaline, and spite. But I made it. I graduated, again. No cap and gown this time. No family in the stands. Just a quiet ceremony and a small dinner afterward with Mark and two friends who knew how much I'd fought for that degree. After graduation, I got a job at a local counseling center. It didn't pay much, but it was mine. A life I'd built brick by brick while they thought I was floundering. Then came Lily. She wasn't planned. But she became the most beautiful surprise of my life. Mark and I moved into a tiny apartment and turned it into a home. The kind with crayon marks on the walls and laundry that never got folded. The kind that felt real. And still, I didn't tell Sandra or Ian a thing. Not about my degree. Not about my job. Not about the baby. I figured if they weren't part of the struggle, they didn't deserve the celebration. But secrets have a way of bubbling up. And the one I'd kept the longest, the one about Dad and the fund, was about to rise to the surface. Because the day I found that letter, everything changed. It started with a box. We were cleaning out the attic of Mark's parents' house, helping them prep for a move. Lily was napping in her car seat at the edge of the room, one tiny sock kicked off as usual. I was sifting through a pile of dusty books when I spotted it, a plain cardboard box labeled in my dad's handwriting, "Amanda, keep." I stared at it for a long moment before I touched it. That handwriting. I hadn't seen it in years, but I'd recognize it anywhere. It hit me like a gust of wind, grief and warmth all tangled together. Mark looked over. "You okay?" "I don't know," I said, my voice caught in my throat. "I think this is from my dad." We brought the box home. I waited until Lily was asleep and the house was quiet before I opened it. Inside were little pieces of my childhood, a photo of us at the zoo, a stack of my drawings, an old birthday card. And then, near the bottom, a letter in a sealed envelope. My name on the front in bold, careful script. Amanda. My hands trembled as I opened it. I knew this was going to matter. "Sweetheart. If you're reading this, I'm probably not around anymore. I'm sorry for that. I would have given anything to see you grow up, to be there when you graduate, to walk you into your dorm room. But life's uncertain, and I wanted you to have this, something no one else could take away. The college fund is yours. No one else's. I've made sure of it as best I can. If you're reading this, and someone's told you otherwise, know that they are lying. That money is for your education, your dreams. I trust you to make something beautiful out of your life, whether college or not, but this was always meant to be yours. Love you always. Dad." I sat there on the living room floor, the letter clutched in my hand, tears streaking down my face. I had waited years for someone to believe me. And now here it was, in ink, in his words. Proof that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't being dramatic. Mark walked in and stopped cold when he saw me. I handed him the letter without speaking. He read it slowly, then looked up, his jaw tight. "Amanda, this changes everything." I nodded. "I know. Because now it wasn't just a memory. It wasn't my word against Sandra's. Now, I had the truth. And for the first time in 7 years, I wasn't going to stay silent. I wasn't doing it for revenge, or for some sense of justice. I was doing it for Dad. Because he had trusted me to live the life he wanted for me, and they had tried to bury that trust under excuses and entitlement. I waited for the right moment. Mark and I decided to visit Sandra and Ian a few weeks later. It was a casual get-together, or so they thought. Ian had recently moved back into Sandra's house after his business transitioned, code for failed. They were both smug when we arrived. Lily ran into the house ahead of us, laughing, and Sandra had the nerve to say, "Oh, Amanda, it's good to see you. You've really made something of yourself, haven't you? Without college and all." That was it. I pulled the letter from my purse and handed it to her. "What's this?" she asked, clearly annoyed at being interrupted mid-patronizing. "Read it," I said. "It's from Dad." Her face paled as she read. Ian leaned over her shoulder, frowning. When they finished, the silence that followed was so loud, I could hear the hum of the fridge from across the room. This doesn't change anything," Sandra said, her voice trembling. "He must have written that before. Before you decided you knew better?" I snapped. "Before you lied to my face? You told me the money wasn't mine. That I was being immature. That I was dramatic. But here's his handwriting, his words. He trusted me." Ian scoffed. "Come on, Amanda. Are we really dragging all this up now?" "Yes," I said. "We are. Because for years, I let you walk around like you'd done nothing wrong. You took what wasn't yours, and now you get to sit with it." They had no words. And for once, I didn't need any. I didn't want the money. It was long gone, anyway. What I wanted was to watch their excuses dissolve in the face of truth. The fallout didn't come all at once. It came in quiet waves. After I handed them that letter, Sandra and Ian didn't apologize. Not really. Sandra muttered something about how hard things were after your father passed and how everyone did what they thought was best. Ian just stood there, arms crossed, jaw tight, like a sulking child caught red-handed but too proud to admit it. They didn't argue, though. They didn't deny it. Because they couldn't. The letter had stripped away their last line of defense. We left shortly after. Mark didn't say a word until we were back in the car, Lily asleep in the back seat, her head tilted just so against her car seat. Well, he said, staring ahead. That was satisfying and horrible at the same time. I nodded slowly. Yeah. The silence between us was warm, not tense. We'd done what we needed to do. We had spoken the truth, loud enough for them to hear, soft enough that Lily didn't have to. But that wasn't the end of it. A few days later, I got a call from my aunt, my dad's sister, Carol. We hadn't spoken much over the years, mostly because Sandra had kept her at a distance, calling her toxic and too opinionated. Now, I understood why. Amanda, she said, I saw Sandra this morning at the grocery store. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. Told me some things I can't quite believe. Like what? She said you ambushed her. That you made some big scene over a letter from your dad. Her voice dropped. You didn't, did you? No, I said, my voice steady. I just gave her the truth. Well, Carol said, for what it's worth, I believe you. And I always suspected she pulled something shady with that fund. Your dad and I talked about it back when he set it up. He was proud of you. That's when I broke. The tears came quietly this time, not out of rage or grief, but relief. After all these years, someone else remembered. Someone else knew what I'd always tried to prove, that he believed in me. Over the next few weeks, I started reconnecting with people I'd kept at arm's length. I told Carol about Lily. We visited her that weekend, and Lily took to her instantly. Carol told me stories about my dad I'd never heard, how he used to sing in the car, how he'd cried the day I was born. I didn't realize how much I needed to hear those stories until I did. As for Sandra and Ian? They never reached out. Not once. No apology. No explanation. Just silence. And honestly? That silence was a gift. Because it meant I could finally stop holding my breath. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about release. I started sleeping better. Laughing more. I framed the letter from my dad and hung it above my desk, not as a trophy, but as a reminder, I knew my worth before anyone else did. And he had, too. One night, after putting Lily to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with Mark. We were sharing a pint of ice cream, something we did when the day had been long but we'd made it through. He looked at me, spoon midair. Do you feel lighter? I thought about it. Yeah, I said. Not because they believed me. But because I stopped needing them to. For the first time in years, I felt like I had space to breathe. The kind of space that only comes after you stop waiting for an apology that's never going to arrive. The letter had shifted something, not just in them, but in me. I no longer needed their validation. I wasn't trying to fix things or win back something I'd never really had. I was building something new. And yet, even as I was healing, the ripples kept coming. One afternoon, I got a message from Ian's ex, Tara. We hadn't spoken in years. She and Ian had split up not long after the business failed. She'd moved to another city, started over. The message was short. Hey Amanda. I heard what happened. I'm not surprised. There's something I think you should know. Can we talk? We met at a cafe near my office, one of those quiet spots with soft lighting and chipped mugs that made the coffee taste more honest. Tara looked tired, but calmer than I remembered. She didn't waste time. Ian told me about the fund, she said. Back when we were together. He used to brag about it. Said your dad would have wanted him to be the man of the house or some garbage like that. My stomach turned. He said your stepmom just signed everything over to him, and that you were too soft to fight. He laughed about it, Amanda. Like it was a game he won. I stared down at my coffee. That tracks. She nodded. I didn't have the guts to say anything back then. But I'm saying it now because you deserve to know you weren't crazy. I thanked her, even though it wasn't necessary. I didn't need confirmation anymore, but I still appreciated it. Because that's the thing about healing. Even when you've moved on, it's a gift to be believed. The more I opened up, the more I learned that so many others had seen pieces of the truth, felt the tension, sensed the imbalance. But we're taught not to interfere in family matters. We're taught to be polite. That politeness is where injustice thrives. A few weeks later, I ran into Sandra at the grocery store. We locked eyes in the frozen food aisle. I had Lily with me, her hand curled around mine. Sandra glanced at her, then at me, and for the first time ever, she looked small. Like she didn't know what to say. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Because in that moment, she saw what I'd built, what she said I never could. A life that didn't include her approval. A life built without stolen money or empty praise. She opened her mouth, maybe to offer some flimsy excuse or platitude. I turned and walked away. That was the last time I saw her. Instead, I focused on the people who had always been there, quietly, steadily. Mark, who never once doubted me. Carol, who started coming over for dinner every Sunday, bringing old photo albums and stories about my dad. Even Tara, who became an unexpected friend. Someone who understood how betrayal burns from both sides. And Lily. My wild, curious, wonderful girl. One night, she climbed into my lap, her arms wrapped around my neck, her breath warm against my cheek. Mommy, she whispered. Did your daddy love you? I kissed the top of her head and held her tight. He loved me so much, I said. More than I ever understood. And now I get to love you like that. And that's when I knew I hadn't just survived what they did. I'd rewritten the story entirely. Even after closing that chapter, there were echoes I couldn't fully quiet. Not regrets, but questions. Mark and I were sitting on the porch one night, the baby monitor humming softly beside us, when he asked, if your dad had lived longer, do you think things would have turned out the same? I didn't answer right away. The stars were just beginning to poke through the twilight, and the sound of crickets filled the silence between us. No, I said finally. He wouldn't have let them get away with it. But I think maybe he knew something was coming. Why else write that letter? Mark nodded. Maybe he didn't trust them either. That thought stayed with me. It made the loss sharper, but also more clarifying. My father had tried to protect me the only way he could, through words on a page. And those words had done what he couldn't, they stood up for me. Later that month, I got a call from the bank, the same branch where the college fund had once lived. An older man named Mr. Green, who'd managed my father's accounts, had come across my name during a records update. I remember your dad, he said. Good man. He set things up with a lot of care. We talked for nearly an hour. Mr. Green told me how meticulous my father had been with the account. How he'd visited every few months to update it. How he always referred to me as his bright girl with big dreams. That call cracked something open in me. Not pain, just warmth. Like discovering a trail of breadcrumbs you didn't know was there. He left a note with the account paperwork, Mr. Green added. I still have a copy on file. I can send it to you, if you'd like. When I received it a few days later, I read it a dozen times. For Amanda's future, whatever shape it takes. Not Sandra's. Not Ian's. Amanda's. She'll know what to do. That one sentence erased years of doubt. It was like he'd reached through time to remind me, he believed in my judgment. Not just my ambition. It also clarified something else. This wasn't just about the money. It never had been. It was about being seen. Heard. Trusted. That night, I sat at my desk, surrounded by bills and to-do lists and half-finished snack cups from Lily's lunch. I pulled out my journal and wrote. I am no longer carrying what they gave me, only what he left me. And then, almost instinctively, I flipped to a blank page and wrote a letter to my daughter. I didn't want to wait until it was too late. I wanted her to have it now, someday, whenever she might need to know who she is and what she's capable of. Because legacies aren't about money or property or who gets named in a will. They're about who shows up. Who believes in you when no one else does. Who keeps your future in mind, even after they're gone. Time has a funny way of softening the sharp edges. Years passed, and the things that once consumed my thoughts, Sandra's smug smile, Ian's stolen opportunities, started to fade like old ink on a page. Not because they stopped mattering, but because they stopped winning. I stopped letting them win. Life, real life, had taken over. Lily was 8 now. Freckled, quick-witted, and endlessly curious. She was the kind of kid who asked hard questions at bedtime and insisted her stuffed animals all got equal snuggles. And she had my father's eyes, not just their color, but the way they searched your face like they were looking for truth. She knew about him. Not the whole, messy history. Just the good parts for now. She knew he loved books, that he made pancakes shaped like animals, that he once built me a dollhouse out of scrap wood and stubborn patience. And, more than anything, she knew he believed in me, even though he never got the chance to say it in person. One rainy afternoon, I walked into the living room to find her standing in front of the framed letter from my dad. The same one I'd kept in my office for years, always just above eye level. She was holding it in her hands, carefully, as if it were something sacred. "Mommy," she said without turning, "can you read it to me again?" I knelt beside her. "You've got it memorized by now." "I know," she whispered. "But I like hearing your voice when you say it." So I read it. "Sweetheart, if you're reading this, I'm probably not around anymore." My voice caught halfway through, like it always did. And when I finished, Lily leaned into me, her head resting against my shoulder. "Did he write it just for you?" I nodded. "Yeah. Before he passed. He wanted to make sure I knew he believed in me. Even if no one else did." She was quiet for a while. Then she said, "If I wrote a letter for someone, I'd want it to make them feel brave. Like this one does." That night, I found a note on my nightstand, scrawled in purple marker on lined notebook paper. "Dear Mommy, if you are ever sad, remember that I love you forever. You always try really hard and you never quit. You are brave. That's what Grandpa said too. I think he'd be proud." I cried. Not the broken, hollow kind of cry I knew so well from my 20s. This one was soft. Grateful. Like something inside me had finally settled. Because it had. What Sandra and Ian took from me wasn't mine to keep forever. That money, that college fund, that symbolic torch of my father's dreams, they had tried to smother it with entitlement. And maybe for a while, they had. But they couldn't erase what mattered. They couldn't touch the parts of my father that lived in me. They never had that kind of power. Now, when I look back, it's not with bitterness. It's with clarity. I see a girl who was underestimated, dismissed, pushed aside, and who still stood up. Who still made a life, one decision at a time. Who learned to stop chasing validation and start recognizing her own strength. Sandra never apologized. Ian never called. I don't expect they ever will. And honestly? That silence is a blessing. It's a fence I didn't have to build myself. Instead, I filled my life with people who showed up. Mark, whose love never wavered even when I did. Carol, who became the grandmother Lily needed. Tara, who stepped out of Ian's shadow and into her own light, and who still sends Lily birthday cards. People who made me feel like I wasn't surviving in spite of the past, but thriving because I chose not to let it define me. I never reclaimed the money. But I reclaimed my story. One evening, Lily and I were lying on the grass in our backyard, watching clouds drift by. She turned to me and asked, "Do you think Grandpa can see us?" I looked up at the sky, the color of faded denim, and thought of the man who left a letter instead of a lecture. The man who trusted me, even in his absence. "Yeah," I said, smiling. "I think he sees everything that matters."